All right, so first off, why consider cloud or hybrid for your VDI solution for your workspace? And we put VDI in quotes because that's what's used a lot in conversation, but really in reality, VDI is just one delivery model, right? It's one method in your secure remote access delivery, right? So your secure workspace. So VDI is virtual desktop infrastructure, but obviously there's apps, desktops, seamless apps, et cetera. So first step is kind of flexibility and efficiency. So really scalable architecture, right? When you're dealing with the cloud, it's obviously highly scalable, makes sense. Obviously you can have the same depending on your infrastructure on-prem. Evergreen platform is probably one of the greatest options there, but with Evergreen comes a cost, obviously. But platform not just your platform as a service offering, what comes from Citrix or AVD, but also the actual instances, right? So if you're dealing with an education environment or a manufacturing environment where you have GPUs, for instance. We were talking about that the other day, Oz. They go and make this physical investment. That card is depreciating after day one, right? That hardware is depreciating. You're on that, right? Whereas in the cloud instances, right, you can just easily go ahead and up that instance. You're always going to be on the latest and greatest. Obviously, there's costs associated with that, but it's nice to always ensure that your workload is on the latest and greatest there from a platform perspective. Simplified imaging and patching obviously is a huge win there, and that's kind of across the board with both solutions. We'll talk about that as we get into this. Cost optimization and power management is key when you're dealing with the cloud, right? The cloud is not cheap. Every single thing in the cloud costs money. Don't want anyone to tell you otherwise, right? When you talk about disk access, disk scales linearly, right? So your performance is tied to the capacity of those disks in Azure. You have to keep those sorts of things in mind. Your compute, everything costs money. So being able to scale up the environment and scale it down based on utilization and cost optimization is super key. A lot more people are moving to an OpEx model, so that's obviously key for cloud there as well. Enhanced security, if you look at kind of the ransomware and a lot of the stuff that's going on recently in the news and has been for a while, a lot of it comes from full VPN access. So we've been talking to our customers for a long time, obviously being in the EUC space for a long period of time, but we really looking to see more and more customers move away from full VPN and doing secure remote app and desktop delivery. With either solution, you can accomplish that goal. Enriched microsegmentation, because you're really dealing with software-defined networking at the cloud level. It really enhances those abilities for microsegmentation between each of those, kind of the east-west traffic in your VNets or your VPCs if you're talking AWS world. So enhanced security controls. You have a lot of security controls, which we'll talk through actually today across each of those solutions. Much more on the Citrix side, but we'll talk through that. Burstability is kind of the standard that you hear, right? Seasonal kind of contractor temp, being able to scale based on demand, scale based on CPU load. But what does it look like in each of those solutions is very different. Pay-as-you-go pricing for DR, as well as just traditional use cases, allow you to kind of, instead of paying for those instances to be reserved, you can actually kind of pay as you go. Maybe it's more efficient, maybe it's not, depends on the business use case. And obviously API support. It's important to understand what that looks like when you look to integrate into your existing ecosystem, maybe ServiceNow or whatever else you might have. So just a couple of notes there. Anything you want to add there, Oz? Or
Oh man, you covered it. Solid.
Sweet, dude. So yeah, so kind of our outlook and kind of our framework as we look through this, there's a lot of different areas across each of these solutions, discussion points and test cases that you can look at when you're kind of comparing the two. But we hit on these four key topics because we thought these would be kind of the best approach, right? So what does the architecture look like? What are some of the key, and we say key because these are the areas we'll show you in the next slide where we feel are the most beneficial to look at to help drive your decision as to what makes the most sense for your organization. What does the licensing approach look like? And then pros and cons of each solution. And licensing, we're covering licensing and not pricing because pricing is subjective, right? It really depends on time of the month, who your rep is, what kind of stuff you got going on the side. And I'm just kidding, but it really, in the end of the day, it depends on. It's definitely dependent on your use case, your scenario, your organization. So that's why we're not covering pricing today. So with that, these are kind of some of the areas that we spoke about, right? So we look at kind of operational and administrative aspects. So we want to look at monitoring and alerting, provisioning, auto scale capabilities, service desk integration, what tools are available for the help desk, is there API support, what features and functionalities, so things like image management, remote access capabilities, app provisioning. We'll look at security, what kind of controls and lockdown capabilities are there from a policy standpoint. How is each of these solutions licensed across the board? Because that's really important to understand. Choice, the ability for choice, right? And choice meaning, can you can you look at different, integrate different identity providers? Like the world's becoming more and more open, more integrated. So that's, to me, that's an important thing. But again, it depends on your organization. Do you have the ability to support multiple clouds or different infrastructure providers? Different user experience things like protocol, UEM, we'll talk through a little bit today. And then the last piece is kind of building configuration. What does the install process look like? What kind of endpoint integration, identity, do you have the ability to do hybrid or not? But the key thing to really understand, so those are kind of our categories we're looking at today, and then really understanding that each of these categories, really you can have different scenarios, and that's why the business case is so important. Not just the business case, but also understanding the security and compliance aspect, as well as the operational pieces across each of these areas in the stack here.